Good morning. Good morning. Everything's situated here. I'm moving y'all around. Good morning. Good morning. So happy to see everybody this morning. Oh, my nose itches right on live video. Hey, Cindy and Jan and Mama Mary and Debbie. Catherine from Colorado, Kat, is flying in today for our Dream Big retreat. Excited to get her here this week. So you'll be seeing her on Bible study later on this week. Good morning, Cassie. It is a terrific Tuesday. There's Tanya and Cindy. Terrific Tuesday, ladies. Absolutely. Hi, Sherry and Jana. There's Judy. Good morning. We're reading April the 18th, 2023. I'm Elizabeth Inman. Be sure and put your prayer requests in the comments. If you would please say a special prayer for Shirley. Shirley is transitioning to heaven outside of a miracle taking place. But if it be God's timing for her, we wouldn't want to hold her back from her glorious transition for anything. And then her daughter, Jan, who's got the wonderful privilege of caring for her mama in these final hours. So, and then a wonderful family, just a wonderful family, close-knit family. Jan has a twin sister who's been battling cancer herself. So Shirley and her babies, even though they're grown, and Shirley's extended family and grandbabies, and you guys know. So if you'll keep that family in your prayers, I would certainly appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Oh, we're looking at the hummingbird on the feeder. We saw our first one last night, and is it the same one? Looks like the same one's back this morning. Those hummingbirds are certainly part of God's glory. Don't you agree? I'm Elizabeth Inman. This is our Dream Big Today 1-year Bible study where we read all the way through the Bible in a year. So excited to have you guys along. We read an Old Testament reading, a New Testament, a Psalms, and a Proverbs. And today's reading is in Joshua chapter 16 to 18. Did I tell you that Joshua is one of my favorite books in the Bible? And then we're reading in Luke chapter 19. Oh, by the way, did I mention that Luke is one of my favorite chapters in the Bible? And then Psalms, it's Psalms 87 verses 1 through 7. It's a short Psalms. And then Proverbs 13:11. And yes, the Psalms and the Proverbs are some of my favorite chapters in the Bible as well. Good stuff today. I think if I was to give a title to today's reading, it would be How Great is Our God? Maybe the title would be Can You Measure the Blessings of God? Maybe it might be The Blessings of God, or possibly Don't Limit God. Hi, Joe. Good morning. Good morning, Lori. Looking forward to the retreat this weekend, Lori. Lori is in charge of our ladies retreat, our Dream Big retreat, Dream Big Girls retreat this weekend in Norman, Oklahoma. We still have room. It's a big center, so we still, I think, have a few beds open to reach our limit of 40. The facility certainly. Thank you, Joe. You're always so encouraging. I appreciate you and Crystal so much. Joe and Crystal and I work together in the Postal Service, and they're such a blessing in my life. I just love those two, and they're out doing God's work every single day, and love that they come on. Crystal's still slaving away at the post office. They're just promoting her and just doing amazing things with her. And Joe's retired and just living life for the Lord. Love that you come on, Joe. Thank you. Give Crystal a big hug for me. But the Sullivan Center is a very large facility. We don't even attempt to fill it up because that would be too many. We keep our retreats very small and intimate. So there is definitely we still have some room for a couple more anyway. So if you decide to come, just show up. You can pay for the retreat while you're there, and Yolanda Thompson and her team is providing the meals for us, and it's home cooked. I think the theme is Mexican food, and oh my goodness, I saw the menu. Wow, it'll be out of this world. Out of this world. So excited about this weekend, most excited about what God's going to do. The theme is the truth will set you free. I know we're going to talk about Occupy this weekend. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Joe taught lots of ASP, which is supervisory classes in Norman, Oklahoma. He did a lot of teaching. Joe did. Yes. So anyway, that would be the title for today. That covers Old Testament, New Testament, even the Psalms and the Proverbs. For me today is don't limit God. Don't block your blessings. We're reading about the division of land, which the land represents the promises. The promises represents the blessings. God was so intent on blessing his people. He wanted them to have the promised land. He wanted them to live in the land flowing with milk and honey. He wanted to give them the best of the best. He wanted them to have the rich, fertile land that would produce grapes so big that 2 men had to carry the grape clusters on a pole in between them. Yes, Joe, Debbie Nolan taught at NCED. She's on here as well. We have a lot of postal people that come on our Bible studies. You guys need to check each other out. I still bleed postal blue. I retired from the Postal Service and love the United States Postal Service. And my second career got started for the United States Postal Service and branched out into federal service. I own federal employee benefit coordinators. There's Maria. Hi, Maria from San Antonio. She's postal as well, retired postal. Anyway, what a small world. It's a small world. But I was talking about the blessings that God has had for the Old Testament saints, the Old Testament Israelites that didn't act like saints most of the time, and how much he wanted to bless them. And if he wanted to bless them at a time when there was no redemption for their sins, as far as Jesus Christ hadn't come yet, he hadn't paid the price for their sins, how much more does he want to bless us when he doesn't even see our sins anymore? I mean, there is no comparison to the way God sees us today versus the way he saw them, because he sees us through the blood of Christ. There's no comparison. And yet, as we read today, we have a tendency in our hustle bustle, hurry up, get your reading over, just fulfill the check box that check, I read my scriptures today. We're thinking, why do I have to read about them measuring off the territory and dividing up the land and on and on and on and on? Why do I have to read all this when really God's wanting us to see, capital S, capital E, the greatness of the blessings that he wants for us. He wrote it down that the blessings are so great that when you measure it, it goes all the way from the east side of the Jordan, which is not the promised land yet, clear into beyond what they could see on the west side of the Jordan. And it was so great that there was land left over, and there was land yet to be conquered. I mean, that is a picture of the blessings that he has for us. Wow. And just like then, they didn't even know what to do with all of God's blessings. Some of them settled on the west side of the Jordan. east side, I apologize. Some of them settled on the east side of the Jordan and didn't want to even cross over. How many of us settle and don't even go after all of the blessings that God has for us? Don't limit God. That's what I got out of today's reading. The promises of God are wide and deep and far. The blessings of God are immeasurable. In today's reading, we see order. In today's reading, we see family and the importance of family to God. God is an orderly God. God is a God of structure. He's not a God of chaos. God is a God of family. Family is important to God. God is a God of compromise. I say a God of compromise in that he listens, and they asked, oh, don't make us cross over. We'll just settle over here. So he allowed them to do that. Now, God doesn't compromise right from wrong. I'm not saying that at all. Don't misunderstand me. But God allows us leniency at times. Maybe I should say he's a God of mercy. He's a God of grace. That's a much better way of saying that, because I don't want it to be misunderstood. God is a God of expansive borders. God is a God that helps us conquer our fears. I mean, we're reading today that fear kept them from God's best. Fear kept them from God's best. Some of them were afraid of the blessings themselves. Some of them was afraid of God. Some of them was afraid of the blessing. Some of them was afraid of the giants. Fear comes in different forms and fashion, but fear attacks every one of us. I know myself, as I read this, I asked myself, in what areas have I allowed fear to block God's blessings? And I'll tell you, it's robbed me. It has so robbed me in so many areas. I think probably the greatest place that it's robbed me is Sabbath rest. Fear has kept me from the Sabbath rest that Jesus Christ literally died to give me. He's been preparing us for Sabbath rest since Genesis. He's been showing us what Sabbath rest looks like when he said, and on the seventh day he rested. And when he created the Sabbath on the seventh day, he gave us physical signs of what spiritual Sabbath rest means to us, and physical signs so that we would understand that spiritual Sabbath rest is a experiential thing that never ends, that there's no beginning and no end to spiritual Sabbath rest. And spiritual Sabbath rest cannot coexist with fear. Fear will rob us of our Sabbath rest every time. Fear causes us to do things and to get into works mentality that robs us of God's blessings. And then today's reading shows us what happens when we hesitate. There's a difference in hesitation and a pause, a godly pause. It's in today's reading back in 2021 when all of a sudden all of these be strong started popping out at me, and God had me go back through my Bible and count and do a word search, and you can see all the little colored sticky notes that I have that I counted. I started off with 36 times in the Bible that God tells us to be strong, be courageous. It ended up I found more. I don't in today's writing I didn't write down the final count. I think it's over 40 times that I've found so far that he tells us to be strong, be courageous, be strong. He wouldn't tell us to be strong if he didn't equip us to be strong. With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. See, we look to ourselves and we think that I have to be strong. I don't have to do anything. And I want to caution us that as we read through these Old Testament readings, it's so easy to develop that works mentality, that we think we're obligated to work. We think that we're obligated to do. We're not obligated to do anything anymore because Jesus Christ changed all of that. Now, the Bible will tell us that if we don't work, we won't eat. And that's truth. That's absolute truth. But pure Sabbath rest allows us to lay down all the works. And in faith, faith will motivate us into the works that God calls us to do. And then all of a sudden, it's no longer works, it's faith. I'm in that transition, I will tell you. I am in that transit. I can finally say that I believe I've stepped my toes into the water. Remember that Joshua led them to the Jordan River, and it was in flood stages. It was in flood stages, and the first step of faith that had to be taken is he told the 12 priests to put their sandaled foot into the swollen river. And then when they did, the waters parted and the ground dried. And then they were able to walk across on dry ground. So I believe I've stepped my little toe into the swollen river, and I'm transitioning into Sabbath rest being the way that the works are being established for me instead of works driving me. My whole life I've been works driven. I can't sit down. I can't rest. I've got to be doing something. I mean, it's the first indication you have. If you are a person who literally cannot sit down and visit with your family at the dinner table, that cannot sit down for 2 hours and just visit, then I'm going to tell you to ask God to examine your heart and see where works mentality has a stronghold on you. That you got to be doing all the time. You can't have just a day of rest. I would work myself into sheer exhaustion until I slept all day long. But here's the other thing. That's another indication. Even when I slept all day long, I felt so guilty about it. I felt so guilty about it. How many blessings did I block? Because here's the deal, guys. He wanted to bless me. Anything I was able to work and achieve, acknowledging God the whole time that everything I've got is because of God, and that's true. Everything I have is because of his provision. That's still true in spite of my works. He's blessed me. But I've blocked more blessings than I still believe, and I use this as an illustration to just make a point, that I get to heaven and St. Peter's going to be walking me around and showing me the mansion that he went before us to create, the streets paved with gold, the mansion. And as he walks me through, he's going to say, "Oh, now, Elizabeth, I've got to show you this door." And he's going to open this door and he said, "Look what's inside." And I'm going to go, "Oh, wow." And he said, "Well, those were all for you, but you were too busy working and you missed them." It's an illustration, but I've blocked a lot of blessings because I wanted to do it myself, because I couldn't trust God because of fear. And fear caused me to hesitate so many times. Mm. Mm. So verse 17 stood out to me. Oh, so many. I've got so many colors on today's reading, but verse 17. Since you are so large and strong, you will be given more. You want to know what I wrote in my column on that? Since you have grown and matured in the Lord, now I will give you more. Another way I could write that is, since you've decided to trust me and you've rested in me, you've rested in your trust in me, and you stop trying to do it yourself, I'll give you more. I mean, it makes no logical sense that when I lay down my works, that he'll give me more. Now see, what the world wants to come in and say is, oh, well, if you don't work, you won't eat. The world wants to say that. Yes, that's biblical and it's truth, in that we can't catch a hold of the truth that if I don't work, I can't eat, or I don't have to do another thing, which is truth, for God to love me, for God to bless me. It's not based on my works. So I lay it all down and say, oh, well, I don't have to do anything. No, faith without works is dead. It takes faith to please my Father, and faith without works is dead. So I can't lay it all down and just become lazy and not work. You see, real faith, real trust in God propels us to do the works of our Father. But then we do the works that we see him have us do. We say the things he would have us to say, instead of, oh my goodness, if I can just do this, and if I can work harder, and if I can just add, I mean, I think it was just the other day I said something about, well, if I could just add another 24 hours to the day, I could get this done. I said that just the other day, and I just got through telling y'all I'm transitioning into Sabbath rest. Oh, pray for me. Since you have grown and matured in the Lord, now I will give up more. Reading on down into that verse 18, and you will drive out the Canaanites from the valleys too, even though they are strong and have iron chariots. When we give up our agendas, when we give up our drive, our ambitions, when we die to self, and it's no longer about us, we will accomplish more than we could ever dream. Did I ever tell you guys we do Dream Big retreats? And we try to instill in others to dream big. And then we try to instill in others to dream bigger. And then we try to show those who dream big that they're living the dream. I'm living the dream. Hmm. Chapter 18, verse 3. And then Joshua asked them, and this is another one that got me. How long are you going to wait before taking possession of the remaining promises of God? It says the remaining land. How long are you going to wait before taking possession of the blessings he has for you? We got to get past the mindset, first of all, that there are no blessings for us, that God doesn't want us to prosper, that God doesn't want us to be wealthy. Wealthy is just one element of the blessings. It doesn't even start with wealth. Wealth is so far down the list of God's definition of blessings. To begin with, I've got written on my prayer, in my prayer room wall, God's definition of prosperity is how much you give. He gives to us and then we give it away. Prosperity means spiritual health, mental health, emotional health, physical health, relational health, materialistic health. And then wealth is in there somewhere. Familia, Familial, however you say that word. Health, career, health. And then somewhere down the line is financial health. He wants to bless us in every way. Ephesians 3:21, beyond your wildest imagination. But if you continue reading there in Ephesians 3:21 and 22, it's based on the power that's within you. And if you don't recognize what the power that is within you is, well, there you go. You've just limited God and you've blocked the blessings. How long are you going to wait before you take possession? And then something that's been on my heart ever since I've been reading in Joshua this time. How about them Levites? It's one thing to be Manasseh and all of the other 12 tribes. It's one thing to be them because they had land and land represented their wealth. Land represented their ability to produce wealth. Land represented all the promises of God, their ability to produce wealth, their ability to provide for their families, their ability to provide for the priests. The Levites were the priests, and they got no land. The Levites, back in the day when there was no electricity, no air conditioning, no power tools, when everything was a struggle, when everything that got accomplished was by mere physical strength, the Levites got nothing. You want to talk about a faith walk? These stubborn, if I just use the words that God used to describe the Israelites when he was angry with them, the selfish, self-centered Israelites. How many times have we read that God become angry with the Israelites because of their self-centeredness, because of their grumbling and complaining, because of their fighting amongst themselves, because of their... And the Levites had no means to make a living on their own. They weren't even supposed to make a living on their own. The Levites was 100% dependent on the tithes and offerings of the people. You want to talk about a scary thing. I don't know why I hadn't thought of it that way before. I know all of you guys had already thought of that, but it hit me different today. It hit me different this year as I read what it took for the faith walk of the Levites. I mean, at least when Manasseh was out there and he was measuring off this border from this border, this corner to this corner, and this corner to this corner, he could see where he could plant his crops, where he could cut down the trees, where he could get timber to build his home from, where he could plant his garden. He could see the physical, where the grapes were going to come from. He could see. The Levites, quite frankly, the Levites saw all the Israelites who grumbled and complained, that didn't want to go fight the giants. I wonder what they saw when they looked at the people, thinking, in our future and whether or not I've got a meal on my table depends on them. Didn't really depend on them though, did it? See how quickly our minds can go? The Levites had to depend on God. We have to depend on God. Even the other Israelites, the other 11 tribes, had to depend on God. You and I have to depend on God. We have to get our eyes off of the job we do. We have to get our eyes off of the pensions we draw, the salaries we have. I mean, if you're being called to be a stay-at-home mom, get your eyes off of the income that comes into your home and obey God. Step back into Sabbath rest, pause, and allow God's blessings to overtake you. That's the promise If you read the King James Version of Deuteronomy chapter 28, verses 1 through 14, he tells you that the blessings will overtake you. They can't overtake you if you're running. They can't overtake you if you're working so hard that you're trying to outwork God. Ooh, can you tell? I got blessed beyond measure reading Joshua. And then he tells them in chapter 18, verse 8, go and explore the land and write a description of it. God provided the promise, kept his word, but the people were scared and didn't even want it. They were scared of the blessings. What's God promising you? Write it down. Write it down. What's the dream? What's the vision? Write it down. Luke chapter 19. Jesus went right back into Jericho. We just got through reading about Jericho. And Jesus went right back into Jericho. And then there was Zacchaeus, the rich man. He gave half of it away. How about if God asked you today, half of everything you have today, your 401k, your IRAs, your savings account, your checking accounts, half your cars, half the value of your cars, half your houses, half the value of your houses, half your clothing? What if he asked you to give it all away right now today? That's what Zacchaeus did. Hmm. And then anybody had cheated in the past, I will give them back 4 times as much. We grumble and complain if we just have to pay them back. And we argue if we have to pay them back with interest. Verse 21, I was afraid because you're a hard man to deal with. So this is the story. Oh, this is the story. Jesus told them. Let's go back to verse 11. The crowd was listening to everything Jesus said, and because he was nearing Jerusalem, he told them a story to correct the impression that the kingdom of God would begin right away. He said a nobleman was called away to a distant empire to be crowned king and then returned. Before he left, though, he called 10 of his servants and divided them among them 10 pounds of silver, saying, invest this for me while I'm gone. But his people hated him and sent a delegation after him to say, we do not want him to be our king. After he was crowned king, he returned and called in the servants to whom he had given the money. He wanted to find out what their profits were. I'm not going to talk about the fact the people hated him because I'll chase that rabbit and we don't have enough time. The first servant reported, Master, I invested your money and made 10 times the original amount. Well done, the king exclaimed. You're a good servant. You have been faithful with little. You have been faithful with the little I entrusted you. So you will be governor of 10 cities as your reward. The next servant reported, Master, I invested your money and made 5 times the original amount. Well done, the king said. You'll be governor over 5 cities. But the third servant brought back only the original amount of money and said, Master, I hid your money and kept it safe because I was afraid. There we go. He was afraid. What was he afraid of? He was afraid of the master. He didn't even know the master. See, that's what fear does to us. It keeps us from really knowing God. That's what our fear does. What blocks your blessings? The journey through the promised land is a narrow path. What is it that blocks your path? Is it fear? Is it greed? Is it unforgiveness? Is it unwillingness? How about believing lies? I was afraid because you're a hard man to deal with, taking what isn't yours and harvesting crops you didn't plant. Those were lies. You didn't have to give them anything. You wicked servant, the king roared, your own words condemn you. You knew that I'm a hard man who takes what isn't mine and harvests crops I didn't plant. Why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it. Then turning to the other standing nearby, the king ordered, take the money from this servant and give it to the one who has 10 pounds. But master, they said, he already has 10 pounds. Yes, the king replied, and then here is our nugget. And to those who use well what they are given, even more will be given. And I think that asks the question today, what is it you have today? What do you have today? Sometimes we get so caught up in what we want and what we wish we had that we're not taking care of what we have today. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Fear paralyzes us. Have you ever been so afraid that you just totally were paralyzed and couldn't move? I have. I had a stack of folders on my desk one time. I believe the number was 26 folders that represented 26 potential clients for me. And they stayed on my desk for weeks, and I was paralyzed and couldn't pick up the first one to process that folder. Man, want to talk about a time of learning for me. Hmm. Hmm. Let's, oh, I hate to skip over the Psalms. I'm not going to skip over the Psalms. I'm going to read the last part of Psalms 87, verse 6. When the Lord registers the nation, he will say, they have all become citizens of Jerusalem. The people will play flutes and sing, the source of my life springs from Jerusalem. And then Proverbs 13:11. Wealth from get rich quick schemes quickly disappears. Oh, does that say wealth from the lottery quickly disappears? Is that what that says? Did anybody else read that? Or was that just me? Oh, it must have just been me. Wealth from get rich quick schemes quickly disappears, but wealth from hard work grows right away, quickly. Wealth from hard work grows over time. Man, basic instructions before leaving Earth. Man, God's so good. So good. He tells us just what we need to hear on exactly the timing we need to hear it every single day. Invite people to this Bible study. Share this on your timeline. Let's get the word out and encourage people to read all the way through the Bible. Pray for our retreat this coming weekend. Thank you for being here.